Welcome back to another episode of Flipping Founders. My name is Kushi Sethi and I'm really excited for you all to see the next episode. I hope you find it helpful. Enjoy the show. So today I have with me the founder of an e-learning company called LearnIt and a consulting analyst at Accenture. Welcome to Flipping Founders, Dhiraj.
Thank you so much.
So excited to have
me.
you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so do you want to start by telling a bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated out of UBC. I spent
Today.
today. I graduated today. I'm really fresh out of my graduation. I spent most of my life growing up in Uganda, which is actually a very big reason as to the way I think and the way I do things. Growing up in a country like that, and then I came to Canada 4 years ago, pursued UBC, decided to specialize in finance. It was really like a last moment kind of pick thing. I was like, what am I feeling, I was confused between like business technology management and finance, and I remember just thinking to myself, I'm like, when I think of the two, what's the first one that comes to my mind?
Yeah.
I'm like, finance, okay, we're doing finance, I was like, that's probably like my gut, and also just the fact that it was a little bit more quantitative. So I decided to pursue that, did my specialization there, did a few internships, started out at Sauter as a business analyst, and then I moved to Scotiabank. I did data analytics over there. I didn't quite like I like finance, but maybe the banking industry wasn't for me. And so I decided to move towards more tech-oriented roles. Then shortly after that, I moved to Labatt, which is a CPG company, and I did like a project management internship. That was a very fun project, and then I ended up doing Accenture full-time, and entrepreneurship has always been there from the start. In my second year, I had a startup called Campus Card, and taught me a lot of lessons as well. Helped me learn more about startups. My dad's an entrepreneur as well.
So you get it from him?
I get it from him. He would be disappointed if I didn't try out entrepreneurship.
I get that.
Yeah.
That's my dad as well.
Exactly, yeah. So then I started LearnIt as well in January 2022. Officially in January 2022, but I was working on tutoring and those kind of things before that. But then, now I'm here, November. Working full time and doing a startup and trying to have a social life as well.
Oh yeah, that could be hard. So about your first startup, like what was it? And are you still doing that?
The first startup was called Campus Card, and it was focused on creating a marketplace for student entrepreneurs. So we saw that a lot of students like to bake and like to do a lot of things, but they didn't have a way to monetize what they did. And so we worked on building a marketplace to be able to connect students that want to buy and student entrepreneurs that want to sell. But of course, we came across to more and more challenges. Building a marketplace is not easy, especially when you have two sides. And then slowly we decided to wind it up. As things got a little bit.
So is that only focused on the UBC community?
Initially, that's how it started off. That was
And what
testing
did
market.
you realize once you started it?
When I started it?
Yeah, like when you started it and when it was focused on like the UBC community and the entrepreneurs at UBC, what did you realize once you were like in it?
So what we realized was that when students are entrepreneurs, they like to let's say bake, or they like to do nails, for example, or something like that. They always start with their friends, and that's who they like to do it with. Like it's like an intact group, I do my friends' nails and they pay me like a little bit, and I'm happy with that, and I think a lot of student entrepreneurs, they if you told them like, would you like to sell more, they'll be like, hell yeah, I'd like to sell more, but they wouldn't really like go out of their way. Like they were happy, it was kind of a side thing for them. It always was a side thing for them, right? So it's not easy to change someone's, what they do on the side and make it their main thing. And students, on the other hand, purchasing is a little bit more difficult because the decisions are made. It's not easy for students to spend more and more money.
Yeah.
That's also a challenge that we face at LearnIt. But I think that's a few things that we realize. It's not easy to build a startup focus on students.
Yeah, and I think to convince like students.
Yeah.
Like that, okay, you can do this full time when they're also like pursuing a degree. So like the time commitment, I think, is a big thing. But now moving on to LearnIt, how did you start it? Why did you start it? What's the vision behind it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. How did I start it? Well, I spent So I'll give you a funny story. Maybe it's funny to me because I think I'm a funny guy.
Okay. Alice said the same thing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. People think yeah, there we go. You see, that's validation right there.
She said the same thing. She was just like, she was telling me about the reels. She started making reels for LearnIt.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I thought they were really funny. Maybe other people didn't, but I think I'm funny. Like, I thought they were funny.
Yeah, there we go. We have a, very tight-knit company culture where we all think we're funny, but maybe none of us really are. But I think, so the question was, how did I start LearnIt? And how did I start it? So my first ever job when I came to Canada was being a PAS leader, which is a peer-assisted study session leader, essentially facilitating courses, first-year courses for students. That was my first ever job. I bombed the interview. I was like, the hell, I'm not going to get this job. And then it ended up happening. Yeah. And I loved it. I stayed in that job for 4 years. I continued to do it because that was the one thing that taught me about how much I loved to teach. Shortly after PAS, I remember, I never really did tutoring before until like second year and third year. I started TAing in second year, third year, and I TA'd a few MBA courses. I TA'd a few undergrad courses, and I was very happy to be able to do that at an undergraduate level. TAing MBA courses is not something that's very usual, so I was just happy to have the opportunity to do that during COVID. And I started to see how many students were struggling when COVID started. And then I remember there's this one of my friends, he got a student ask him to, like, she wanted to get tutored. And she told my friend, she's like, can you tutor me? And my friend could not tutor at the time because there's a conflict of interest with his particular job, right? Okay. So he messaged me, he's like, can you tutor her? And it was for an accounting course, and I forgot everything about accounting, like, I didn't remember anything about it. And so he sent her my email, she emailed me, she's like, can you tutor for me? And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a course I've never done before. I don't even know what it's like to tutor one-on-one. Like, I've never done it before. So I'm like, you know what, like, screw it. I sent her a message saying, yeah, sure, I charge $50 an hour. And I was like, pretty high. Yeah, I never earned more than 20 at the time. So I'm like, you know what, if she says no, then yeah, I'm happy because I never She goes and she says, okay, sounds good, when can we have the first session? I'm like, holy shit. So that's how my tutoring career first started. It's just me being just, kind of stupid like that. But it worked out. And then I spent 3 hours before my first session just teaching myself again the whole course. Yeah. But then from there, it worked out well. I think people started to talk about me in the tutoring space. And I think it was just, I started to see that a lot of people needed tutoring, especially during COVID, coming out of COVID. And at some point I reached a stage where I could not help everyone, but I really wanted to. I genuinely wanted to help people succeed because I saw that there's so many startups, so many companies focusing on mental health issues, and which is amazing. Yeah. But I found that there was very few that were focusing on helping students academically. And I think that the academics is one of the huge reasons, academically and socially, but academically is one of the bigger reasons also why students face such issues, right? Yeah. So I was like, everyone's focusing on the social side. Let's get more friends. Let's do a lot of startups around that. And there's less around the academic side. And I saw how much happiness students got when, for the first time in their whole life, they get an 80% or they get a 90% for the first time, And that sort of happiness is what really drove me to keep doing better, keep doing more and more. And that's when I decided that, I wanted to help more people. I wanted to make it bigger. And that's I started LearnIt. Very messy in the start. I was just playing around doing other things. But, today we have about 15 people working with us, 5 tutors, and we're starting to work with high schools as well and more than universities. So it's nice to see that, being able to help people. I think that's the kind of thing that keeps me going at least.
Yeah, and I think that's also really great because when you're I would say in a competitive faculty, like business, at least at UBC, everyone's getting 75, everyone's getting 80. So you need to do better or at least do the same. Yeah. And then I think I read on your website that you said something about how the biggest learning for you has kind of also been that everyone can learn, but everyone learns differently.
100%.
So when you were tutoring these kids who wanted help, how did you figure out what is their kind of learning style? Because even in high school, we're gonna study world wars, and we're gonna study all subjects, but nobody really teaches us how to study.
Yeah, I think it's the first part I think is about having the awareness and having the just acknowledging the fact that it's not a one size fit all. Like you need to really take some time to think about what works for the student. And the best way to do that is that, when you first start out, like let's say you have your first session with a student, right? You don't know them. You don't know them personally. And then you start to teach them, and then, if you have that in your mind that I'm trying to really understand how does this student like to learn. And then you see that whenever I use this way of explaining it, they just get it. They always get it. And then you always try and do that because that's what works for them. But that's not what might work for someone else. But you need to be aware that, people are going to, understand differently. People have different ways of understanding, people take more time, people take less time, people understand certain things faster, certain things slower. You need to acknowledge that, and you need to always, observe when the students have that aha moment, when they understand something, when they're able to do a question, what's helping them do that question, and so when you're able to do that, you're able to create such a powerful experience for them, because like in that 1 hour session, the student can get so much more than they would in like a 5 hour lecture, because it's only focused on them, how they need to learn, how they like to learn, and you're getting them to really understand everything. Because I have tutored a lot of students at this point, but the one thing that I do know is that literally everyone can get like above a 90. Everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is, you can do really well. You just need to take some time to understand how you like to learn, and just like double down on that and keep doing that, because you'll 100% find success.
Yeah, and so what were some of like the common, let's say, problems that students were facing when you started tutoring them?
Yeah, so I think in the nature of it, I think a lot of students that came to us, it was mostly like quantitative courses. You have your accounting, your finance, your econs, a lot of like math heavy courses. And the reason they're coming to us is because something's not working for them in the lecture, right? Otherwise, why would they come to us, right? So part of the problem and the challenge that they usually faced was that either the prof went too fast, like they weren't able to keep up, because the moment you don't understand, let's say 5 minutes in, you're not going to understand 60 minutes in. Most of the time, right? So people weren't able to really keep up at that pace sometimes. But it's also like people always looked at math as being difficult, because people never really had an easy way of learning it. Right? And so whenever they put up a formula and they start doing math, people would automatically think that it's hard,
difficult,
and they can't do it. But if you take time to explain every step, you take time to explain how things are working together, then students, like the next time, they'll do it so quickly, and they'll do it themselves, right? Because it's mostly now focused on, do they understand how we're getting where we're getting, right? Rather than just being overwhelmed by the amount of math that's there. So yeah, those are like some of the common challenges we faced, and I think like being patient with people, and also just like telling them, like making math like a super chill thing. Like it's not like of course we can't.
How do you make it super chill?
I don't tutor for math, unfortunately. But there's other tutors that are like, I've watched them and they do an exceptional job at it, because I remember when I was interviewing tutors, I didn't care about, tell me about time doing leadership. I don't give a shit about time doing leadership. I care about how you teach and, how you understand people. So, our interview was them teaching me for 30 minutes. And half of the time it was like stuff that I forgot. Like, they teach me math and about a topic that I long forgot. And so, some of them, they, for example, would use a bit of humor, right? They would make a little bit of jokes about, even when you use humor, you make the session lighter. And when you do that, the student stops thinking about how hard the math is, and they start just like enjoying it, right? Like humor is a big part, and also just like explaining, like visually showing them. So for example, let's say you're calculating, like a very simple example, let's say you're calculating the area, right? Like if you told me like a half times base times height, I'll be like, okay. But if you show me how, if you shade the area, if you show me like something more visual. I think that we do a lot of that in high school. We do a lot of drawings in high school, not that much in university. But I think like just being able to do that is really helpful, and people don't necessarily realize that when they're learning.
Yeah, and when you started it, you were obviously about to graduate from university. So what were like the key factors that kind of you considered before doing LearnIt full time, like properly? Because working and having your own startup is obviously really hard. So what were like the key factors that played a huge role in this decision?
I think for me, it was like startups are like your baby, like a relationship, right?
Exactly.
Like it's that when you feel like you're doing something, like it's like I was already doing a startup. I just didn't make it official. I was tutoring. I was working with other tutors. Like I was building something out and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like at that point you should go for it. Right. Like you're doing something you love. You're helping people in an area that they really need help in, and you want to make it bigger because you want to do it more and more. And so I remember I was talking to my dad. My dad is a lot more risk taking than I might be, but I was talking to my dad and I was telling him like, yeah, I have this idea and I'm thinking like maybe I should try and do it.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, what are you waiting for? Like literally
go for it.
Go. Like he's like, I don't care if you do it full time and you need help paying your rent, because I would rather have a son that's a millionaire than a son that's working
9 to 5
and like working for someone else, right? So my dad's also been a huge role model for me, and he's always pushed me. He's never kind of been like, oh, like you need to pay a bill, or like what about some safety. He's always been a little bit more risk taking, and I think that balances me out in some ways. So sometimes I need that push, and my dad helps me with that. But now I think I learn from him and stuff like that. So some factors I consider, but also I know that I always wanted to do entrepreneurship. I know that I wanted to do it. It's just that the timing of it, when it felt right.
Yeah.
And it's like proposing, right? When it feels right. When the time's right. And so then at that point you just want to do it, and once you get some momentum, you want to keep going and keep going.
Yeah, and what did like the first 6 months look when you started it, in terms of like what it's gonna look like, the pricing? How did you what did the 6 months look like? Because I think the 6 months or like the first year is like the hardest.
Yeah. It's the thing with me, the thing there's different types of entrepreneurs from what I've observed. I think there's a certain entrepreneurs that will be like, let's talk to customers and let's try to understand.
Did you talk to students?
I didn't do a shit. I just said, you know what, I want to do, like, I did. Don't get me wrong. Of course I did, because I need to understand who's using LearnIt and to understand my students. But at the same time, I don't have the patience to sit around for 6 months and make a business model canvas and talk to people and understand insights and do all that stuff. I'm more of the I'll try it and I'll fail and I'll learn again and I'll keep doing it and I'll
figure it out while you're doing it.
But also balance that out with not just being like just if you keep doing that, then it's also not going to be successful. Like you need to have a good balance. So like in the first 6 months, I think that I did a lot of like research as well, just because I needed to understand what the hell was out there, what's happening, what are students using, but also I was the kind of person who I started very early on to try things out. Like a student messaged me and she's like, do you have a psych tutor? I didn't have a psych tutor at the time. I said, yeah, tomorrow you'll do a session. I called up 15 people, I found a psych tutor, because I needed to find a psych tutor, right? So sometimes you just figure it out.
Yeah, as and when you go.
But I think that that was the first 6 months were good though. Like I enjoyed it because I think there's less stakes. Now I have to maybe be a little bit more careful than I was like when I first started.
Yeah.
But I think I've personally seen that if you want to do entrepreneurship, you should do a combination of those things that people traditionally do, but also consistently try things out at a very early stage.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And since you're like a finance student, how did you decide like the pricing of different like packaging?
I think for me it was mostly about how much are my
students willing to pay.
Yeah. I didn't want it to be too crazy, because I think that's a bit greedy, right? So I didn't want it to be like I've seen other people offer a lot higher prices, and to me that's not why I built it in the first place.
No.
Right? I didn't build it to like just overcharge people or anything like that. So I looked at what's out there. I looked at the type of quality that we have over others, and I also thought about what students are willing to pay, right? And using kind of a combination of those, we set our prices. But those change as we learn more, right? It's not like it's always going to be that for its whole life, right? Like, as we learn more about who we work with, who our customers are, we adapt that to be able to match that as well.
Yeah, and are you looking for funding? Do you have funding?
Yeah, like in terms of like seed funding, like we're not actively looking.
Okay.
Yeah, because right now it's because I work full time, I'm able to invest my own money into it. And I would rather invest my own money than right now at an early stage have someone come in at seed funding level. But as we continue to expand, we're working towards expanding across Canada as well. Like we started on Vancouver, BC, moving towards more of just Canada, and then moving towards US hopefully. So as we do that, then we will need more and more funding.
Support,
but like right now, it's not like absolutely pivotal to the way we work.
So right now, it's mostly UBC courses. Like it initially started out as UBC courses. So now, are you gonna maybe venture out to like maybe more universities, maybe University of Toronto? Like, is that how you're going to do it, or like what are your plans for like the future?
Yes, I mean we're expanding to more and more universities, right? One of the big things that we love to share, and we do a lot, is that we offer very personalized courses, right? Like that's the whole point. It's not like a random tutor that's a PhD guy that knows some of his stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It's like someone who has done the course and someone who has done well in it. So you can be sure 100% that when you spend time with them, you will do well as well, because they've done the same course with more or less the same prof and have done well, right? So there's no I'm not sure about this, so I have a very different way of teaching it. It's very like structured, and students usually find more success in that method. And so we're trying to, that's also a challenge, of course, because it makes it a bit harder to expand, but we're working towards other universities that have similar course structures at UBC, because that's where we started out, and then also moving towards high schools and tutoring for high school students as well.
So would you find a tutor in that university? Like, would you interview tutors, get tutors there, and then they would teach? Or would they be a few, like, how would you choose the tutor, and how would the expansion?
Yeah, it's mostly going to be the first part, like where you're looking at student tutors who have done the course, who have done the course, and who are in probably their upper level. And so just looking at them and trying to interview them and get them, unless the courses are very similar, and the student that's getting tutored doesn't mind getting tutored by someone who's maybe not in the same university. But we do our best to try and focus on student tutors who've done the course in that university.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And you also want to do the same for like high school and middle school.
Yeah, so high school's a bit different. So essentially, more or less anyone who can tutor at university level can tutor at high school level, right? Like it's like, for example, if you can tutor math at a university level, you can definitely tutor at high school level. Similar for physics, chemistry, accounting, all those courses. So it becomes a bit easier, because in high schools, if you're looking at like, let's say, AP, IB, those are like standardized syllabus.
Exactly.
Like it's standardized across all schools. So it becomes a little bit more easy to leverage the tutors that are using university and then bringing them into high schools as well.
And, when we talk about like e-learning, I think a lot of them, like Khan Academy and all of these other companies, they've been there from a while. But I think after 2020 and COVID, that was this increased demand for almost like e-learning. So now that there are so many, you can say like e-learning companies, how do you set LearnIt apart from them?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, COVID, brought a lot of competition, but there's competition because there's opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? There's never going to be competition without opportunity, right? So, in terms of like differentiation, we're one of the few companies that really focus on student-led learning rather than like professor-led learning or anything like that. It's not for us. What we realize is that if I'm a student and I'm facing a challenge in my course, my goal is to do well in the course.
Yeah.
I don't care if a 60-year-old prof teaches me, or a young person 2 years older than me that can help me succeed teaches me, right? So we try and focus more on that kind of student-led learning. And we really try and, it sounds kind of stupid, but we really try and build a very strong relationship with our students. So our tutors and our students are more than just, a tutor-student relationship. They're friends. They're like, they hang out together. They grab coffee together. Yeah. It's more of a personal relationship, because like that, you feel as though you can, really share what your challenges are. You can you feel more comfortable asking those questions. So we really try and create a very strong relationship. And of course, I can't share everything we do, but there's certain things that I've learned that I've shared with my tutors, and there's certain ways in which we're able to try and at least foster a positive relationship with our students.
Yeah, and then what do you think has been like the best way to get more clients, which are like students?
From what I've seen, it's just people talking.
Word of mouth.
We can do as much promotion as we want, but when it comes to something like tutoring, the best kind of, the way you'll grow is when other people say nice things about you.
Yeah.
And it's not going to always be about, marketing. You can still do that, but I think word of mouth is one of the biggest, especially in the learning space and education space, because that's what people rely on when they pick who they want to get tutored from.
Yeah, and I think also when you kind of decide that you want to go for tutoring, you're already paying for the course, which you do not understand, and then you have to pay more for the tutoring. And then I think first session, you don't realize if the tutor is good or not. I think maybe second session, third session, you get to know if you're actually understanding what they're talking about, or if it's a good fit.
Right.
So I think for students also, when somebody tells them like, oh, we've tried it and it was great.
Yeah.
So word of mouth definitely goes a long way, especially in small communities. Like if it's just UBC.
Yeah.
Then like.
Exactly, and the thing is that, for example, with us, it's like if, let's say, I understand that it's not always going to be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
Right. So we offer that flexibility. Like we're very, very transparent. With our students, right? We ask them, is it working for you? It's not working. What's working? What's not working? And our tutors know that it's meant to be it's meant to be beneficial for them.
Yeah.
So it's not that, oh, the tutor didn't vibe with me, I'm not a good tutor. No, you're a great tutor. There's a reason you're successful, you're a tutor, right?
No.
But there's going to be certain students that learn differently. So other tutors might be better suited to them. And so we are always very flexible with that.
And how did your team building look like? Like when you started out, you obviously wanted to have like a team in place.
Yeah.
So how did you decide how did you hire them? On the basis of what? Just like maybe grades, learning, or were there also other things that you looked for?
I personally don't look at grades because
you don't?
I know as a tutor,
yeah,
you can do well if you wanted to. If you had the right resources, maybe you could have done better. Right? So I'm not very focused on grades, except for tutors. For tutors, that's very important.
Yeah, for tutors.
But for the core team, I think for me it's mostly about the attitude that people have towards the way they work, their openness, and I like people who are not afraid to share what they're thinking, who are not afraid to bring up ideas or to tell me that they don't agree with me, because I think people like that are those that will really challenge what's happening, especially when you're a founder. People might agree with you and be like, yeah, it makes sense. In their mind, they're like, he's bullshit. What the hell is he saying,
Yeah.
So I need people to tell me that, you know what, I really don't understand what you want to do. And I think we need to talk a little bit more about it. And I like people like that kind of attitude, that openness, and they really just want to understand. I think that's super important to building a very strong team. And I think, for me, the other thing I look at is that when you're looking at people, let's say you're hiring people for a tutoring company or e-learning company, right? You're oftentimes going to get people interested that maybe do well academically. Usually, that's the trend, right? But for me, it's more, I think you can be well academically, but you need to be very humble. You need to be very kind to people.
You need to be very patient.
You have to be very patient. And I think that's what, once I asked my students, I'm like, why are you still with me? Tell me honestly, why do you still want me to tutor you, right, for years? And why do you keep telling people about me? I want to know from a feedback kind of way.
Yeah.
And they said that, one of the things about the way I teach is my patience is insane. And they can't believe how patient I am. My name means patience as well, right? And I started to realize that sometimes people they like small things like that. They like when you're patient. They like when you're kind to them. When you grab them a coffee on the way to the session, right? When you send them a gift card saying, you know what, you deserve it. You did well on your exams. Have a coffee on me. Small things like that, they really make a difference because then you're starting to build something a little bit more personal.
Yeah, and I think that's really important as well because they are obviously coming to you for help, and you do want to provide that support academically, but also just kind of emotionally. This is not going to be like a big thing, like even if you get a bad grade, but I'll help you get like a good grade. I also read this thing on your website that I found really interesting, was if you fail a course, we'll pay for the next one.
Yeah.
Has that... So you pay like the fees for the next course. Like for international students, it's like $5,000.
If they have to do it again, we pay it again. Yeah.
So you pay $5,000.
It's never happened because they've never failed.
Okay.
There's a reason we say that.
Yeah.
They will never fail.
They'll never.
If they start with us from the start, and they work with us from the beginning,
mm-hmm.
I am 100% certain you can put my life on it. They'll never fail.
Wow, that.
Yeah. I don't think they'll ever fail.
And what if somebody wants to join, maybe like in the middle, they fail their midterm?
That's why that package is only for the start.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I would join a day before my final, knowing that I'm going to fail, right? So of course there's a balance, like it's a commitment.
No, but like do you take students off, like if you know, maybe like a lot of times this happens, you start a course, you think it's going great, I can do it, I have it, like, and then after the midterm you're like, maybe I'll pass. Few days before the final you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's too late for a withdrawal. Then how do you handle situations like that?
I think it really depends on the student. Like we take the time to talk to the student, to try and understand, you know, how committed they are. You know, how much invested they are, because if they don't care about their own course, then it's likely that they're not going to be involved in the way they learn, and they're not going to care about that. So sometimes we do talk to students and we assess based on every individual's situation and their attitude, but most of the time, like if it's too late, then we still help them, and to be honest, most of the time they end up passing, even if we help them in the middle.
Okay.
But I think, you know, we always do our best to help people, even if you know, I remember there's a student with us, and she did some sessions with us, and I think that afterwards she said, you know, she's facing some financial struggles and she can't continue on, and I didn't, you know, of course I don't like the fact that, you know, I wanted to help her, I still wanted to help her, so we still offered to help her offline, we still help, like we still do, right? And so it's sometimes like we find ways to help our students, and that's the end goal. Like their success is literally our success. When we see them do well, when we see them go from like, you know, I think like a 40% to a 90%, that's like an insane jump, right? So we see that happiness in them, and that's what keeps us going.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like, I know like sometimes grades can be scary, and I think the way school kind of trains us is if you get a good grade, you're gonna be successful, and if maybe you don't, like maybe your future isn't that bright. So what do you think are some of the problems with the traditional education system, whether it be high schools or just colleges? That why are so many students, you know, failing courses? Or I remember this one course, even like Alice told me that there was like a 30% fail rate.
Yeah, I think, you know, what it comes down to is with the education system is because a lot of weight is placed on exams. And I understand why it's placed on exams, because it's a test of your individual ability to do something, right? To do certain concepts, or, you know, test yourself. The problem with that is that people have the ability to do the questions correctly.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just not in the right environment. Sometimes I've met so many students who when I'm with them, they will, like, I look at them do the questions, and I look at them, I'm like, they're going to be fine. And the reason that maybe they face more challenges is not because they're not smart or not able to do it, it's because of the environment. They feel stressed, they feel pressured when they exam, they feel anxious, and that starts to get to them. Right? So I think that, you know, of course, I don't think that there's going to be, I don't think it's also right to just eliminate exams and then just focus on, like, you know, just, let's say, group
assignments.
Yeah, so I also don't think that that's the right way to do it, but I think that finding, you know, of course, this is probably harder to do, but finding a way to make, you know, to set an environment where students are comfortable, and then testing their ability to do something, because I think that's their real ability to do something.
Yeah.
Right? But of course, there's always going to be pressure and stuff like that, and sometimes you just have to learn to cope with it, which is also part of life, right? So, but yeah, I think that's one major thing that hopefully will change. You know, we start to adapt more and have more of an understanding that people, you know, are anxious in exams sometimes, and that might affect their performance, but it doesn't directly correlate with the fact that they might not be knowledgeable, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just not good test takers. Like, especially me, like, I'm not a good test taker. And I think a lot of people also, like, feel that way. Like, they can study, but then when, like some people, kind of perform their best under pressure, and some people fail under pressure because that's just how like your mental health works, and that's how like your nature is.
Yeah.
So I think if you could maybe like change a few things about the traditional education system, what would they be?
I would, if I could change some things about the traditional education system. I think one of the things is that having worked, full-time internships, I think a lot of work is focused on, how do you communicate with people, how do you work together to get something out the door, and then how do you, work with people that are difficult to work with and work with people that are easy to work with. So I think, of course, we have group projects and those kind of things, and that's good to some extent. But I think like, if I was to change something, it would be like, what are they working on? So it's like, for example, I wouldn't want someone to do like a group project where they're writing like a article or report on, this company did this. Like I don't know if that's even that useful, for some people. So I think I would focus more on, keeping that sort of thing where they have to work together, but making certain things that they have to do mandatory. So for example, let's say for example, using project management tools, right? That's used in the real life. So why not use it in your group projects? Get used to using them, right? Because it's going to help you work as a group. You're going to learn to work better, and you're going to use it in your real life.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, presenting is so important. And I found that a lot of SOTA courses, commerce courses, they have a lot of presenting, but not as much in other faculties, right? So trying to make it more standardized, having more opportunities for people to speak, even if it's not very publicly, because some people are not comfortable with that, but even within smaller groups and having more of those opportunities. More engagement, really trying to get more discussions, and I think they do that a lot at like an MBA master's level, and very less so at an undergraduate level, because they try and focus more on just getting key concepts out.
Yeah. And what did when you were like, when we talk about like the e-learning industry now, because there's so many companies out there and they're doing so well.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you find really interesting about the e-learning industry now and kind of where it's headed?
I think one thing that's become very interesting is that, similar to the way people work, the way people learn is changing, and people are getting very comfortable learning online. Before it used to be like, online learning was like a side thing. I'll do a certificate.
Yeah. I'll put it on my CV.
I'll put it on my CV. I'll get a certificate. I'll put it on my LinkedIn. And it was a very like side thing to do. And I think now it's starting to take more shape in terms of being at the heart of actually how they learn. Like what people spend their time doing is mostly like learning online. And so I think that's been a very interesting thing to see, that people, just like the way they work, they're also getting more and more comfortable with the way they learn, and they're getting comfortable learning online. They actually like learning online.
Yeah.
They get more engagement, and we see a lot of interesting companies like having very engaging activities in their online learning. And so those kind of things are really going to change the way people learn, and also the way they interact, and then the way they see the world as well. So I think that's been very interesting for me to see, and it's very exciting also, because that really makes the opportunities limitless. There's not really a barrier. There's not like people have to be in a physical room. We do, even at Accenture, there's so much work done with the metaverse and education, and there's so much opportunity to improve accessibility in remote areas, or like help people really immerse themselves in a certain environment, because that's how they will learn better. If I told you that, if I try and teach you how to ride a cycle, you'll probably never be able to do it. Like if I told you, okay, you put your one foot here, and you put the other foot here, and then you try and balance yourself. You lean left, you lean right, you try and paddle, and you do that. If I wrote it down on paper, you'd not be able to do it. But let's say I put you in an environment where you're really like in that space mentally and visually as well, then you're able to see yourself and learn a lot more quicker, a lot better. And so immersing people in those environments is also something that's been very, very, very exciting, I think, technological advancement.
Yeah, and what do you think are some of the things to kind of look out for in the future?
In the future, with learning specifically?
Yeah, with learning.
I think, like, education, right?
Yeah, the education. Like e-learning. E-learning.
I think one big thing is, with respect to e-learning, I think we're still going to see a lot more, like, universities, like, complete online universities, like virtual universities, getting, like those trying to become a little bit more popular as people start to get more comfortable learning online, and also like trying to see more applications of like virtual reality or like metaverse technology. I think that's going to start playing a big role. It's already used in a lot of universities across the US when it comes to lab testing and those kind of things, and it really genuinely improves the output and the way people learn. And I think just being able to capitalize on some of those emerging technologies to make education more impactful, to make it more accessible to people. I think that's something very exciting to look forward to in the future. Maybe our kids will wear goggles and go to school, which is not how I would like. I would like them to socialize with friends and
they're just in their room, like attending a class and then they're meeting people.
Exactly, but I think having a balance of both is going to be very powerful for education in the future. But I honestly don't know how much the education system is going to change in the coming years. Our parents learn like this, our grandparents learn like this, we learn very similarly. I see some courses that are trying to change it, but fundamentally I think at its core it's going to take some time to change.
I think our kids are probably going to have the best high school experience.
Yeah?
Like, it's going to be interesting, at least the education part. I don't know about the social part.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people it's not the best, but I think definitely the education part.
Yeah.
It's going to be more like personalized.
Exactly.
And I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah,
and now kind of moving on to like personal questions. I think the first one would be the one lie that school tells you about the corporate world.
The one lie that school tells you about the corporate world. I mean, I'm part of an e-learning company. So, but I think a lot of the times I used to ask, I think we all think about this. You're doing like a math question, like when the hell am I ever going to use this in my whole life? And you're not. You're probably not going to use it in your whole life. But I think like whenever I used to ask my teacher about it, my prof about it, I'm like, when am I going to use this? They're like, you will, like, trust me, like, fundamentally you will. I remember like, a lot of finance courses, they simplify things, right?
Yeah.
So for example, when you're learning, let's say about NPV, there'll be a project and then, you have a cost. You have certain values in the bank. You have a discount. Then I'll think to myself like, what if the CEO is mad or like, the suppliers are not negotiating? Or what about those real world factors?
Exactly.
We never look
the
at those
uncertainty.
The uncertainty, right? And so we never look at those when we have like questions in front of us. And so I think the one lie would be that it's not a copy paste. It's not like what you learn in finance is what you're going to do in finance. Or you learn accounting maybe a little bit, but it's not always a straight mapping. But I think like it's about taking what you fundamentally learn and then applying that to a real world context.
Okay, that's good to know. That I'll use that at least sometime.
Yeah, eventually, like fundamentally.
Fundamentally,
you'll need those things, but not like directly as well.
And what is kind of one advice that you would give to your younger self?
Start early.
Start early?
Yeah, like I think I waited too long to do something on my own. I would have loved to do something when I was younger, have more time as a student to be able to work on a startup, for example. It's because you have so many resources to you. You have so much time to mess around. And
as a student.
As a student, right? And because you're studying, like you're not working, right? You have to study, and so trying to do more and more things, like not even like even if it's like a very small project or very small startup, like just trying to do more and more of that at a young age, to be able to get comfortable with it, rather than when I have higher stakes, when I'm working, when I'm graduated. So I would love to do that at an early stage. And the other thing I would tell myself is probably to take a little bit more risks, with regards to, if you think that you might like it, then just do it. If you think that it,
try it out.
Yeah, just try it out. I think having that sort of mentality is very helpful. And I think maybe I was very conservative when I was a bit younger.
Really? Like, do you know, like, how?
For me, it was always like, am I comfortable with it? Like, do I know it? Then I would do it. But I think just being able to be like, it feels like something so interesting, but I have no idea what it's about. And just being able to go after it. I think that kind of hunger is what will really breed successful people. And I would tell my younger self to not be afraid to do that, because your dad's there to support you as well when you're a student.
Yeah.
And your parents are there to support you when you're a student. And so just go ahead and do that at a young age and be a bit crazy. And the second thing is observe a lot more. I think I was reading this article about IDEO, and it was talking about the power of observing. It's so underrated. When we look around, that's when you realize that there's so many problems to be fixed in the world. They gave this example. When you have fruits and there's a sticker on it, you like tear out the sticker, then it's on your finger, then you're flicking it, you just throw it at a random place and it flicks off. But no one thinks about it. Now it's just you don't even think about it. You just do it, right?
Yeah.
So if there's someone that's actively observing that, and they're being able to see that, that guy looks annoyed, like they're doing that, or like, it seems like such a annoying thing to be able to do even consistently. So like having that sort of mentality, awareness that, just keep observing, look around you, see, actually try and think about, what's wrong with the way we do things, what's right, and try and question things a lot, like question the smallest things. Like if you get in the habit of doing that, you will realize that you'll start coming up with more and more ideas. Like for example, let's say on a calculator, right? Like why do we press the AC button like 10 times, right? Like why don't we press it once, right? It still does the job. Why do we, operate, let's say, like doors a certain way or something? Like just being able to observe a lot and being able to just, not take things for granted and like not just like do it and be in the moment every time. I think that's super important as well.
Almost in like be intellectually curious, or just generally just be curious about things, question the norms, the beliefs.
It could also be something you're interested in, like like it could be anything. Like
it could be anything, big, small, just
big, small, anything. And so just being aware and being observant is very, very fundamental, I think, to make successful entrepreneurs or even successful people.
Yeah, and what would be kind of like the title of a book written about your life?
Title. I don't know. A title that's written on my life.
Of a book.
Of a book.
I
don't read that much, but I think if I was to maybe think of one off the top of my head, maybe something along the lines of like, it's too cliche, but like, like a beautiful mess kind of thing. Like my life is super messy. My calendar is a bit messy as well, but somehow it works out. So at the end, like, it's kind of like if you've seen, there's like design thinking diagrams. So it's like at the start it's just scribbly, but then eventually as you go on with time, it starts to become a straight line. Right, and I think that right now I'm in a very scribbly phase in my life. I think I always will be, but I hope at some point it starts to go itself out. And I think that's how it's been for me from a young age, and I think that might convey it as of this point at least.
Yeah, and that's a good title though.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people.
It will be a bestseller.
Yes, New York bestseller.
Yes, bestseller. There we go.
Yeah, and now kind of like moving on to like books. What are your favorite like books, podcasts, YouTube channels?
My favorite book right now that I recently read is called Build, by Tony Fadell. Tony Fadell is the guy who made the iPod. That's how they know him. But also the Nest, the Google Nest, and he sold it to Google. But it's called Build and just released in May. So it's a very new book, and that's the first book he ever wrote. But it's an amazing book, and I think every single person who's in their 20s should read it, because it doesn't just talk about entrepreneurship. It's not just a book about that. It's a book about mentorship, your own life as a young as a young teenager, a bit about entrepreneurship, even about jobs and how to succeed and how to do well in them. I think just reading that really gave me a lot more of awareness, a lot more understanding, and I think that's one that I've particularly enjoyed reading quite a bit recently.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, and it's not too long. I don't usually read books. So if I do, it's probably like entertaining.
Yeah, and how about like podcasts, YouTube channels you enjoy?
Yeah, podcast. I listen to podcasts and YouTube both. I listen to a lot of MKBHD. I know he's very popular. He's a technology focused YouTuber, and he has he brings on some very interesting guests for his podcast. But the other podcast, I really, really listen a lot of is called 20VC by Harry Stebbings. Probably one of the best podcasts I've ever heard. And Harry, he's I think right now he's 19 or 20, but he's an extraordinary person. I think he inspires me a lot. He didn't go to university, but he has a venture fund of his own right now. He has a startup of his own. He invests in people. He, on his podcast, he started it when he was 16, and he has guests coming on. Like, I think he had Tony Fadell came on to his podcast as well. He has, like CEOs of companies. He has people from Sequoia Capital, which is a venture fund company, and he's been able to really build it out. And I think he's really very inspiring because he has done it at such a young age, and also he wasn't afraid to not follow the norm. He didn't go to university because he's like, I'd rather spend the money building a startup, right? So
that's a wise decision when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really good podcast as well.
Okay, and now that today was your graduation, so I guess you're a bit like nostalgic. Your favorite memory at UBC and LearnIt. One UBC and then one LearnIt.
My favorite memory at UBC, let me think. There's so many. Wow. I would probably say I really loved Jumpstart, and the first week of UBC was a very exciting time. I met my best friend on the first day of university.
Oh, really?
First person I ever met is my best friend today, and so I think just the first few weeks were always very nice, and then I think there's days where you go out on long drives with your friends, and
it's a small thing.
It's a small. Yeah, to me it's always been the small things. It's never about that's what comes to mind, right? So that was very special, and LearnIt. I think the most special moment for me happened just yesterday, right now that I think of it, and we all went for dinner, like my whole team, and it was just so nice. As a founder, I think I'm the most happy when my team's happy. I genuinely think that I do my best to make sure everyone's happy, everyone is is content with what they're doing. And so just being able to see everyone on a dinner table having a good time, that something as small as that makes me very happy. And I just it's just crazy to think that it's grown so much in terms of size very quickly. And I just love to see that people are, we're all there for each other, and we're all very happy together.
It's like a mini family.
It is like a mini family, yes. And I'm that that one dad that thinks he's funny but he's not really funny.
The dad jokes.
The dad jokes. And I already feel old because my teammates are making references to things and I have no idea what they are, and I'm like, oh shit, that sucks.
You just graduated.
Yeah, I already feel old. Yeah.
You just graduated an hour ago.
An hour, yeah, this morning. So I think it's getting to me very quickly.
But it's okay.
Eventually, I'll start to learn from them.
Yes.
All the cool things that they do as well.
Yeah, all the new things that are happening.
Yeah, I got to keep in touch because I'm focused, on kids and university students. So yeah, hopefully they start to actually think I'm funny at some point. Yeah.
Oh, fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's my biggest. That's my vision for
life. That's your vision, yes.
Make sure people think, we're all funny.
We're all funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. And it's been really fun learning about your experience. And I wish you nothing but the best for the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always very nice to share a little bit more, to learn a little bit more from other people as well. And so I'm just happy to be here. And yeah, feel free to check out LearnIt if you guys ever need help.
Yeah, I'll put it in the link. Hope you found this episode helpful. See you next Thursday.